Welcome, champions, to the next overview and tier list ranking, featuring the newest champion. This is where we'll break down their mechanics and place them in my overall tier list for every champion in the game. So let's talk about Presto, the neutral good human wizard in Seat 2. He's starting off a new affiliation that we've had glimpses and hints were coming with Dungeon Master and Warduke, the Saturday Morning Squad, which should give you an idea of some things to expect in the future for this affiliation. For those older gamers out there, they are looking to tug on your nostalgia strings with this crew, no doubt. Presto himself serves your formation as a support. His basic attack will have him pull out a random projectile from his hat and throw it at the nearest enemy, dealing 1 hit of damage. This might sound like a ranged attack, but it is classified as magical. His ultimate is basically just a more advanced version of his basic attack, holding his hat out in front of him and firing an assortment of objects at enemies. Both of these attacks are enhanced by his formation abilities, so let's dive into those. Starting with his basic damage buffing formation ability, we have Hesitant Helper, where he increases the damage of champions in the 2 columns in front of him, so basically the reverse of Blushi in the same seat. With Hat of Many Spells, he will also increase the damage enemies take from all sources when he hits them. And yes, this does include click damage. Damage taken will be increased up to 5 times, multiplicatively, as well as being pre-stack, meaning it scales well, but with it only stacking 5 times, it won't get as wild as other pre-stacks out there. However, he will also have a secondary effect with his attacks depending on what hits the enemy. If it's a birthday cake with 1 candle on it, it will slow the monster by 50% for 5 seconds. If it's a skateboard, the monster will be knocked back a short distance. And if it's a rotary phone, the monster will be stunned for 2.5 seconds. Alternatively, with Ultimate Hat Trick, once he unlocks his ultimate, it will be a random effect between 3 options. With Snowballs, he will hit enemies on screen, dealing 1 hit of ultimate damage and slowing them by 50% for 10 seconds, and will change the weather to snow. With Fireworks, he will deal a hit of ultimate damage to all enemies, stun them for 5 seconds, and change the weather to fog. And then with Tornado, he will hit all enemies on screen and knock them back, and change the weather to rain. So with all that weather changing, you can imagine he's useful to pair with Virgil of this season, who scales with the weather being changed. And lastly, for a sprinkle of a new form of utility, Component Scavenger. He can scavenge Modron component pieces when killing bosses. This will have a cap, but that cap will increase by 20 every day. And while he is not at the cap, he has a 10% chance to gain 1 component piece every time a boss is defeated and he's in the formation. But not only does he need to be in the formation, he needs it to be a boss that progresses your run. You can't go back to a boss you've already defeated in your current run and just camp and farm it up. So he needs to be in your active pushing formation to collect them. But also keep in mind, if you skip a boss with Briv and he's in the formation for the skip, that can also count. You just might need to reset the run before it shows up. This isn't that useful for those who have already progressed their Modron cores, but if you're newer or stretching to finish your cores, this will be quite handy. For example, it takes 250 components to upgrade a rare to epic pipe, meaning every 12.5 days you'll be able to upgrade a rare directional pipe to epic for free. His specialization choices are all ways to increase the effectiveness of Hesitant Helper. With Humble Heroes, he will increase the damage bonus for each champion in the formation with a total ability score of 78 or less. With Junior Juggernauts, he will increase the bonus for each champion slotted with an age of 20 or less. And with Magical Mystery, he will increase it for each champion slotted with a magical-based attack. As all of these bonuses are the same flat percent, simply take which is the most populated option in your desired formation. Simple. His equipment is pretty standard, but useful. 1 for all champ damage, 1 for each of his damage buffing formation abilities, and 1 for his specializations, leaving the last 2 for ultimate damage and ultimate cooldown. His feats aren't bad, buffing his damage buffing formation ability, his debuff, and his specializations, and an ability score increase. So let's talk about his event, Grand Revel. This year we have Presto, Brother Uriah, and Vi. Quite an interesting bunch here as there's no connection between any of them in any way. Presto is a support with a unique mechanic of collecting those pieces. Brother Uriah is a healer and support, and Vi is a support and speed champion, and all of them have different affiliations. Of course, gear up everyone to the best of your ability, but as far as a focus, it's a tough call. Brother Uriah is likely going to be passed on, unless you just like him or have a personal attachment to the Black Dice Society. Vi's recent rework has made her a high ceiling potential buffer, able to reach very high numbers, but is in a competitive seat, and her buff is not positional, which matters for mini DPS. Then there is Presto, who isn't the worst, but certainly isn't the best either. His main use will probably be farming up those pieces, until we see what the rest of his new affiliation might bring to the table. And if all you want from him is the pieces, that doesn't scale with gear at all. And of course, keep in mind it is Vi's last year before being retired to only being unlockable through time gates. Now what about his achievement and adventure variants? His achievement is another simple one, just requiring you to collect 1,000 Modron core pieces. It'll take a bit of time to farm him up, but nothing too bad. All you need to do is slot him in your pushing formation until it pops. In his first adventure variant, he cannot be moved or removed, and only champions in the 2 columns in front of him can deal damage. This ain't no thing, as that's where you want your DPS anyway, if you are forced to use him so they can benefit from Hesitant Helper. The second allows him to be moved, but not removed, and an NPC will join the formation taking up one of the slots, but will buff champions next to her, reducing their attack cooldown by 2 seconds. Also, only enemies that have a debuff can take damage. So it would be wise to put Presto next to the NPC, so his debuff happens more frequently, and potentially slot other debuffers as well. His last variant allows him to be moved but not removed, and you will only be able to slot champions who either have a magical-based attack, are age 20 or lower, or have a total ability score of 78 or lower to match his specialization choices. Overall, there are a lot of options between the 3, so this should not be an issue for anyone. His availability is just alright to good, being available for 2 patrons naturally, and Zariel with a feat, though he will be locked out of the Day 1 Dexterity Trials restriction. His base damage buffing is pretty dead on average, increased only by the fact he's also a debuffer, and while the debuff can scale decent being pre-stacked with equipment, again, only stacking 5 times caps that ceiling pretty harshly. At the end of the day, unless you need the debuffs, you're probably only going to be using him for the Modron component pieces, which is indeed useful for those who need it, but that usefulness tapers off once you've piped your core. I'm going to put him next to the only friendly familiar face he has in the game, Dungeon Master, in the B tier. Alright buffing, alright debuffing, and a unique Modron mechanic that has a varying degree of usefulness. Absolutely worth having, but not worthy of heavy investment at this time, in my opinion. Thanks for checking in. Cast a spell on that like, sub, and bell for me. Leave a comment on what you think of Presto, and what you expect in the future for his affiliation. And always remember, have a hell of a time out there, champion.